I think for me, it was really, having that first experience of breathing underwater and thinking how cool that was. And then seeing everybody else, at the classes that I was DMing for, experience that. It's like, all right, I want to show people how to do this. I want them to experience the same thing that I experienced. And it's extremely rewarding.
It's episode 8 of Dive In the Podcast with special guest, Will Ristine. Welcome to Dive In the Podcast, your favorite podcast about all types of diving, scuba, tech, freediving, and more. We cover it all. Every week on Monday, we post new episodes filled with diving news, interesting dive topics, environmentalism, and much more. This week, we'll be talking about becoming a scuba instructor. Will Ristine joins us the whole episode, and he'll tell us about his journey to becoming a scuba instructor. Before that, though, there's no diving in the UK right now, and less stringent requirements elsewhere. In our Think Blue segment, Nick Winkler talks about lionfish removal efforts in the Caribbean. Nick Fisher tells us about a moment in scuba diving history. We'll have a book recommendation, a dive safety tip, and we'll learn who we should follow next on social media. Before we get started, though, let me introduce everyone. I'm your host, Justin Miller. Nick Fisher, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Justin. Thanks for having me back.
Excellent. Glad you're here. Mr. Nicolas Winkler, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. Can't complain.
And not April. Will Ristine, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here.
So where is April?
Where is April? Well, apparently she's signing papers for a house or doing something crazy like that tonight. So she's
big moment.
Big Ontario moments.
She gets a pass this week.
Yeah, this week only. So, quick bit of news. Recently, the British Diving Safety Group held an online meeting to determine the state of diving in the United Kingdom. Their decision was that nobody should be scuba diving in the UK. BSAC, the British Sub-Aqua Club, summarized it on their website, quote, "The consensus of the meeting was that the infrastructure to safely support diving activities is still lacking and requires more time to reestablish itself. Contamination risks remain too high during the preparation for diving and could put undue pressure on businesses who must operate safely and within the law. More importantly, should emergency support be necessary, this would place an unacceptably high burden on rescue services and medical treatment facilities at a time when they are already stretched thin," unquote. PADI, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors, also released their specific guidelines on how to deal with infection risk COVID-19. PADI laid out 8 tips for risk reduction, quote, "These are all tips, techniques, and guidelines. There's no specific requirements on how and what to do, other than anything your local government requires," unquote. The key thing to note here is that situations may be different in your area, and as PADI is a worldwide agency, they can't set local rules. We'd love to hear from you. Email us or go to our website, diveinthepodcast.com, and send us a voice message. Let us know what you're doing, what's going on with diving where you are. We might even play your message on the next episode. As always, links to the BSAC and PADI statements are in our show notes.
Was that decision by the British government prompted by those 2 divers that got lost and needed to be rescued? I think this was a couple weeks back. This was in BBC. Did you guys hear about this?
No, I totally missed that.
No, I heard about it.
Yeah, a diver gets lost and they have to deploy like search and rescue teams, helicopters, the Royal Navy, a bunch of local fishermen were sent out to help, and they were fined pretty heavily once they were rescued. I think the guy was in the water for like 10 hours or something.
One of the guys drove like a day and a half to get to meet his buddy. So it's not like they were just like one of them just went to their local dive site. Like one guy like drove halfway across the country to go diving.
Jeez.
Yeah. I'm just going to get a sweater. I'll be right back. Just give me a sec.
Okay.
Editing note.
Winkler's got chills.
And there's the title. there's the episode title right there. Yeah. Wink's got the chills.
So tonight we got my friend Will Ristine here. I met Will in Grenada when he was just getting into scuba or around that time. And Will, you can correct me there if I'm wrong. So I thought it'd be great to have you on the show to talk about what it's like to get into diving. And then, because I know you follow that path up to instructor and you got a whole bunch of plans as it relates to, committing a life to diving, so to speak. which is a lot of us dream of, and not everybody gets to do. So that's kind of cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do now?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Big fan of the show, so thank you, guys. I've always loved the water. It's something I knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to pursue it. I grew up in New England, spent my summers surfing up in Maine. And so long story short, I originally thought marine biology. Then 4 years of school wasn't for me, so I ended up taking another path. Wasn't a huge fan of that path. Ended up getting a cushy office job, paid well. Had the office, window overlooking the parking lot. Said, yeah, this isn't for me,
all the dreams.
The dream.
The American dream. So my wife, Rebecca, she said, I got accepted into St. George's University in Grenada. And it was a kind of a tough decision to leave the cushy, well-paying job and, take this huge risk. Then I thought, well, you know what? Scuba diving would be pretty cool as a career. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's something I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. I remember seeing divers up in Maine and thinking, how cool would that be? I just didn't know how to achieve it. And I did a little bit of research, and it's like, all right, well, I think, this is something, I know I'll really love it, and it's something I think I want to do as a career. So I ended up going to Grenada, getting my open water certification, and from there, absolutely fell in love with it, and I realized this is what I want to do. So I got an apprenticeship at one of the dive shops, just kept learning and decided I wanted to pursue my open water scuba instructor. So flew down to Florida, did that, and then ended up working for the same dive shop as an instructor. So very long story short.
How were those first dives in Grenada?
Oh, it's incredible, man. I mean, if you've never been, I encourage you to go. And especially, this is for everybody, definitely when this whole thing blows over, I encourage all the listeners, to travel, support these islands. If you've never been to Grenada, check it out. The reefs are amazing. They have the Bianca Sea, which is the Titanic of the Caribbean.
That sounds really nice. I've been... last week we spoke to a gentleman from Dominica. This week we're talking a little bit more about Grenada here, and it's really been making me wish I'm traveling right now, or wish I was going to be traveling very soon.
All in due time.
Soon enough.
Do you have a favorite dive story or a scary moment?
Scary moment?
Without incriminating people that we know.
That's a very leading question.
There's this guy, Nick Winkler, I know. And
Jesus.
Yes. Scary moment? Well, I think my first time when I did a Discover Scuba, I went out with the dive master who was the captain as well. And there were it was a younger couple.
Were you teaching or were you doing the
I was teaching at this point, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did the pool session, everything seemed to be going well. They seemed very comfortable in the water. And she said, I'm a little nervous to go down. And said, don't worry. So we got in the water, and right away you just see, their pupils dilate. It's like, oh no, all right. So they were a little nervous, take your time going down. We have the line for you. I'm going to go down with you. We have our dive master here too. We're going to make sure everything's fine. And so we get down there. Then all of a sudden, she says, gives me there's something wrong signal. And I said, all right, hold on, because I always try and fix the problem. I think most of us do try and fix the problem underwater rather than going to the surface, of course. And said, hold on, just remember to breathe. Then all of a sudden, she just decides to rip her mask and her regulator out and try to shoot to the surface. Fortunately, I grabbed her, put the regulator back in her mouth, made sure to purge it beforehand. And then we all slowly made our way to the surface. So I'd say that was a pretty, interesting moment.
And then you sold her. And then you sold a freediving course after that, right?
Then I sold her. Yeah, no, she went all the way up to that.
always amazed of how every time that story gets repeated from another dive professional somewhere else in the world, that exact situation, my course director told me when I was going through my OWSI that you're going to have a student that will eventually try to drown themselves out of panic. And I never thought it was real. And then it happened to me, and I'm glad it's happening to other people as well. And that my course director was right on the money with all that.
Oh, and the best part is she just got a little bit of water in her mask too, and that's why she wanted to shoot up to the surface.
That'll end a dive for sure.
Yeah.
But she was okay in the end, right?
She was fine in the end. You know, she said, "Yeah, I want to go back down and try again."
That's good.
So she did end up going back down, and she stayed for a little bit and said, "You know, I want to go back up." But in the end, she was fine.
That's kind of the important thing, right? As an instructor and as another diver, you kind of want people to enjoy that experience, even if they have a scary moment. The worst thing, at least for me, is to have somebody go like, "I'm never touching this diving thing again." I'm like, "Oh no, that's like." There's so much to explore, so much to experience. So for somebody to walk away from it, that's probably one of the worst things that I think, at least for me, for an instructor. Yeah, I feel like I failed.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
You said that you didn't actually start diving till you got to Grenada, and then you took your OWSI in Florida. Those two fairly warm water destinations. But you're from Maine. Have you done any diving in Maine yet?
I have not. No, I only went surfing up there. So when I was younger, I didn't care how cold the water was. And now I've been spoiled, and I don't think I can go back.
I've been trying to get him to come here, but he refuses.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Is there anything that made you actually kind of go and say, I'm going to do this? When you were, after you're certified, was there any sort of moment where you were just like, yeah, I want to be an instructor? Yeah,
I think, so I got my dive master in the Caribbean at the dive shop. And then, I was an apprentice for a little while there, and I would work with a lot of the instructors, and there was two of them that were definitely my mentors, Paul and Michelle, and just seeing what they do. And I think for me, it was really, having that first experience of breathing underwater and thinking how cool that was. And then seeing everybody else, at the classes that I was DMing for,
right,
experience that. It's like, all right, I want to show people how to do this. I want them to experience the same thing that I experienced. And it's extremely rewarding. So then you've been teaching now for how long? Just about a year, actually. Been an instructor for about a year. And are you teaching now? I mean, COVID, all that aside, I assume that might have put a pause on things, but
he's got quite the COVID story for you.
Oh, well.
Right now I am not. No, so we're back in Florida. And,
okay.
We had to evacuate Grenada. They sent all the students and their husbands, wives, girlfriends, boyfriends on charter flights and got them out. We had about 4 hours notice to do that.
That's gonna be brutal. Pick up your life and leave, and with 4 hours of notice.
Yeah, and the worst part is our bags ended up getting taken off the plane that had all my gear in it, and we didn't know where they were for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, that was pretty devastating. Fortunately, I got everything back,
but you were in the Northeast. It's not like you're gonna go diving there anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, didn't need the gear anyway. Exactly.
One of the reasons I thought it would be kind of cool to have you here is, can you tell us a little bit about the experience of what it's like to do an instructor course?
Yeah, definitely. So the place I did my instructor course at was Ease in Vero Beach, Florida. And it was a house built in like the 1960s or 70s that had a big pool in the back. Mm-hmm. And it had 2 rooms with bunk beds. It had the male dorm and the female dorm. And it was just me and 3 other guys. And there were no other girls. So I don't know how I pulled this off. Either I was, nobody wanted to be with me, or I just got lucky, but I got my own room, which I guess is unlikely. So, unheard of, rather. And it was intense. It was wake up, study, do the classwork, practice, the skills in the pool, study some more, repeat, and this was for, I think, 10 days. And
it's a hardcore boot camp style IDC here.
Yeah, a buddy of mine who I did it with, he's a veteran, and he's been through all sorts of stuff overseas. And he goes, man, this is really tough. And having that, like hearing him say that made me feel a little bit better about, all of that.
So Will, you mentioned earlier, that you had some good mentors. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about the significance of, having somebody that can lead you into, the dive master and then eventually prepare you for the IDC and the IE? What's their role like, and how did that impact you? And in a way, how did that impact the way you dive and the way you teach?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, to meet as many people as you can in the dive industry, specifically professionals, and meet as many of them as you can and talk to as many as you can and ask questions. And I think the worst thing you could do is go into become an instructor and then think you know everything. I try and learn something new every single time I go out diving, whether I'm teaching or whether it's just, a fun dive. Answer any question you have about diving. And Michelle is the one who taught me my rescue up until dive master. And I think it's important to, if you're going to DM, to be a DM for as many instructors as you can as well, because then you learn different styles. You'll learn what you like, what you don't like. And the more people you teach with, the more that you will get out of it in that sense.
Cool. There's a kind of a thing in freediving that people like to say that it's better to surround yourself with people that are better than in freediving than you're at. It can be intimidating, but you're not going to learn from people that aren't as good as you, right? So surround yourself with people that will challenge you. And I think from a training scuba point of view, that sort of applies as well. You're only going to learn from people that are better than you and that are going to challenge you and drive you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the worst thing you could do is go into become an instructor and then think you know everything. I try and learn something new every single time I go out diving, whether I'm teaching or whether it's just, a fun dive.
As far as scuba goes, are you also a free diver?
I am, yeah, actually. So while I was doing the apprenticeship, and it's at Aquanauts Grenada, by the way, which is an excellent dive shop. So if anybody's going to Grenada, make sure to check it out. That's where I met Nick Winkler, and he came. Did you come back from Canada? Was it?
Probably. I don't remember where I come.
You were traveling somewhere and came back, and Peter introduced me, and then we locked eyes, and it was love ever since. No, I met Nick and I did the freediving course and absolutely fell in love with that too. So I think that's really important for anybody listening that wants to become an instructor. Make sure to meet people, talk to them. I didn't know that I would love freediving as much as I do now. And ever since, I met Nick had a little boat that we'd take out with one or two more guys. And it was incredible. Love freediving.
What's your favorite part about freediving?
I would have to say just beating your PB. There's right. Something, yeah. Besides, being with you, Nick.
Oh. You sure you don't want to come to Nova Scotia? I'll take you, Devin.
Yeah. No, I'd have to say beating. Yeah, the relaxation of the whole thing, honestly, is my favorite thing about freediving. There's a lot of meditation that goes into it. And then, so you have to for me, I get, as relaxed as possible during the breathe up. Then once you go down and, you look at your computer and you go, oh my God, I hit, 80 feet. Then the next session you go, it's like, oh, I hit 90 feet. It's super rewarding.
It's not all about the numbers, Will.
That's right.
So, Will, what are you doing to pass your time in Florida now?
Well, the beaches recently opened up, so my wife and I, we went to the beach today, which was pretty nice. And, we're keeping 6 feet apart from everybody else. And the thing is here is the beaches are there's so many miles of beach
right
on each coast that it's easy to do that. I'm hoping to go diving soon. The dive shops just opened up again. So I'll probably make my way over and dive some springs.
That's good. I hear there's some holes that need cleaning in Florida as well.
That's right. Yeah. That's I'm gonna for now. I mean, if nobody's looking to get their certifications, then I will happily scrape the bottoms of boats to make it work.
Listen, I've dove for golf balls in golf course ponds, and that's about probably the worst thing anybody could do ever. So, at least a boat hole you can swim around a little bit afterwards for fun.
See some wildlife.
Yeah, exactly.
See anything other than mud and golf balls.
Yeah. Barnacles, I hear that's quite the wildlife to see.
It is.
Barnacles are the creepiest thing in the ocean, by the way.
Why is that?
They just close up of a barnacle. Go do some macro recording of some barnacles with your sweet camera, and they're just they're super creepy.
So now that gives me an idea. I'm just going to take some macro footage of barnacles and just send them to you at random hours.
Give me nightmares. Thanks.
Spam Justin's DMs with barnacle close-ups.
Have you ever seen this? You've seen the skeleton shrimp here?
They're also... they're terrible because they're terrifying in a way because they clamp onto you and you can spray them with a hose. You can you can burn your dry suit and it's still going to be covered in skeleton shrimp. Like they look like the little guys off of Men in Black.
Men in Black, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, I'm gonna get you.
We're not really selling Nova Scotia diving at the moment here.
Totally. Skeleton shrimp are pretty cool though. Yeah. They're like little aliens.
They definitely
There's
look
the
like little aliens.
So I got a question for you, Will. You've gone 0 to hero right in your certification. I did something similar as well in Manitoba, so not as nice diving as in Grenada. What do you have any tips?
Ice diving?
Oh, no, I did ice diving through after I was an instructor, but ice diving and
nice diving.
there's tons of ice diving in Manitoba. Nice diving, that's questionable. I don't think our listeners have gotten out to Manitoba yet, so I think that's a safe thing to say for now. But anyway, Will, do you have any tips or any advice that you'd give to any listeners that are thinking of pursuing a career in scuba that haven't even started, or just your experience in general with the scuba industry?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I did 0 to hero. I made sure I liked it before, I went off to instructor or dive master. I made sure to get some dives in between. Because I know that there are some places that do the 0 to hero where you can do your open water course and then just go all the way up to instructor. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that just because I think there's a lot of people out there that I don't think would really enjoy becoming a dive master or an instructor. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of kind of grimy work that goes into it. If you work for a high volume dive shop, you're going to be down there, you are going to be scraping the bottoms of boats. You're going to be hauling tanks on the docks. And I think maybe 40% of it is actually diving in the ocean. But even then you're looking after other people. You're not going on recreational dives that often. At least I wasn't getting paid for recreational diving. And so there's a lot of responsibility that goes into it. So I just say to anybody listening that's wanting to pursue a career in diving, go diving first. Make sure you like it. See what the instructors are doing. See what the dive masters are doing. Ask questions. As we're all instructors, I'm sure everybody here loves when people ask them questions. I know I do. When people ask me questions about diving, what it's like to be an instructor, because at the end of the day, it's a really cool job, and I love what I do. So
that's a really good point.
And we're all in it for the money, right?
Yeah,
we're all making millions over here with our PADI instructor certs. That's why they're gold plated. That you definitely got to make sure that you love what you're doing. That's it's really easy to just see the glamour, especially diving in Grenada, or diving professionally in the Caribbean. It looks like a really sweet kind of just glamorous job, hanging out on boats, chilling with tourists and going diving. But it's interesting to hear that there's a lot more to it, sort of behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot more that goes in than just swimming with the fish. If you have 8 open water students, if something goes wrong, you have to know what to do. Mm-hmm. Their lives are literally in your hands.
Well, we're gonna hop out here to a quick commercial break. Will stay with us and chat through the rest of the episode.
All right. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll be right back. Nick Winkler, you've got a Think Blue segment for us this week.
Tonight on a Think Blue segment, we're talking about lionfish. In the last podcast episode, we mentioned lionfish hunting in Dominica, and that's something that really happens throughout the Caribbean and the Gulf region. And for a lot of people, it's important to know that lionfish are actually an Indo-Pacific species. They're actually 2 species. And they were introduced into the Western Atlantic region, it's thought somewhere as early as the mid-'80s. But they really became noticed in the early 2000s around the Bahamas of Florida. There's a bunch of theories as to why they showed up. One of the biggest ones is that people in the aquarium trade were just kind of dumping them in the ocean when they were kind of growing too big for their tanks, and they kind of took over from there. And they've been known to go as deep as 300 meters. They're extremely prolific in terms of reproduction. They'll pretty much eat anything that they can fit into their mouths, fish, crustaceans on the reef, and they really have very few, if any, of natural predators in the Caribbean. So they have a huge impact on cleaning up juvenile fish and impacting those populations in a lot of areas really where reefs are already under mass pressures from development, tourism, and boating activities, that sort of stuff. So lionfish in the Caribbean, people remove them. Scuba divers and freedivers remove them, and it's not something usually as people that come from a recreational perspective that talk about sparing fish. And when people hear about it or hear about it for the first time, they go like, "Oh my God, you're killing stuff. That's not cool." But really, in the Caribbean, they're a real problem. They're a real nuisance, and it's a human-caused problem, effectively. And it requires a human solution. And one way to do that is to use a pole spear to remove them. They're extremely tasty. So as far as eco-friendly seafood choices out there, that's probably one of the best ones you can have. They do have venomous spines, which, with a little bit of care into how you actually use the spear, and then putting them in an appropriate container. So people use homemade buckets with that they put them in, or really commonly a lionfish are zookeepers that are a big PVC pipe with a funnel that's been cut, so you can kind of stick the lionfish in and then pull the spear out, and the lionfish sticks in there. And then once you bring the fish on the boat, the only thing you need to do is remove the spines, and then you treat it like any other fish, right? You can scale it and clean it and then prepare it, and it's really tasty, really nice, and it's something that people can engage in, right? So if you're traveling to the Caribbean, you can get some training. A lot of shops offer some basic training. Some even offer some specialties, and they'll show you how to do it. I don't know, Will, maybe you can tell me about it, but I know Paul was using like little plastic bottles with weights on them, and he was showing people how to use spears on the water in the pool. Is that right?
Yeah, I've never taken Paul's class, but I think he said that at some point.
Yeah, I think he was doing this thing. You have this setup where people could target practice on the water, and that's kind of important too, because the last thing you want to do is go on the reef and shoot the spear about wildly. Because one thing, when you miss the fish, they actually learn, so they get hard. They're actually pretty easy to approach, but once you've hit them a couple of times, they get really smart really quick. As anybody that's been shot at, my get really clever about that. And also, you don't want to be hitting the reef and damaging it. So one of the things you can do, you can go and ask a dive shop in the Caribbean and see if they do lionfish hunting, whether they can train you. Pole spares are pretty cheap. The setup's not expensive. So with a little bit of training, just make sure you follow the local regulations and keep off the reef while you're doing it. And then usually a lot of places, especially boutique resorts, they'll let you. The dive shop will take the fish, clean it for you, and send it to the hotel restaurant and actually serve it to you that evening. That's pretty cool. And we were talking to Simon last week, and his dive shop has the best lionfish sandwich I've ever had. So highly recommend lionfish hunting. Good way to clean up the reef and do an eco thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a tasty fish. I've had it multiple places, made very well. It's white fish, so you can cook it 1,000 ways, and it just tastes delicious. And and the poisonous barbs people are always worried about, but there's only like 4 or 5 of them. It's actually not a huge thing. They just cut off and you're ready to rock and roll once you know what you're doing, of course.
Have you been stung? Has anybody here been stung by one?
I haven't. I do creek saltwater aquariums, so I've definitely seen pictures of people's hands who have been stung by their aquarium lionfish, and that looks pretty brutal.
That's probably how the fish ended up in the ocean to begin with. Someone got stung and they're just like, to hell with this. This is a dumb pet. If I want to get attacked, I'll get a cat. And stupid fish.
Have you been stung, Will?
I haven't. No, I've seen people get stung. It doesn't look fun.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I think I got stung once, and I was at the end of one dive, and I was gonna go on a surface interval and then do another dive, which I did end up doing. But basically, I can use my hand, and this is obviously not a pro tip. But you get stung by a lionfish, go get it treated. The first aid treatment is hot water because it's a protein, so you want to neutralize it as hot water for as long as you can stand, as hot as you can stand it. You just got to be careful because you tend to lose sensation in your hand, so you can actually burn yourself and make the problem worse. But it's probably like a good 12 hours of solid pain. So as far as learning curves, getting some training and doing it right and not getting stung, you will be grateful for not having ever been stung. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen Coyote Peterson, but he has a video online where he purposely sticks his hand on some spines and gets stung. So
that dude's nuts.
Yeah,
that's insane.
To what end?
What do you mean?
Like, why?
Well, he does these videos where he gets
for the likes, man.
Yeah, for the likes, for the thumbs up.
Smash that like and subscribe button. I'm gonna stick my hand in a lionfish tank.
Oh dear.
Nick, maybe you should be doing the closing. You've got the verbiage down pat there.
Yeah, I'll throw it to me right at the end, and I'll smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll stick my hand in a lionfish tank next week.
Perfect. Speaking of you doing things, you've got a milestone in diving for us this week.
That is a sweet setup to a really not interesting segment this week. I'm just kidding. It's a good one. The milestone this week.
To tell yourself.
I might have to edit that out. The milestone this week is going to be a quick one, but it has been roughly 100 years since research began into the use of helium-oxygen gas blends to help with deep diving. This technology has adapted over the years and has made for tremendous advancements in diving capabilities, both in the technical diving world, but as well as commercial diving industries. Using the helium-oxygen blend has allowed for dive records to be set and has also allowed for advancements in saturation diving in occupational dive industries. A really distinct feature of this particular blend of gas is what it does to the diver's voice. Since there's such a high percentage of helium, obviously it makes the diver's voice sound hilariously high. This was really well displayed in the movie Last Breath, the documentary that was on Netflix for a while. This is not a hilarious movie. I'll preface this whole thing, but this is not a comedy. But it does give a really interesting look into the commercial diving world and also the use of this helium-oxygen gas blend in use.
So why do we use helium in diving?
And so Trimix, for anyone that doesn't know who's listening, reduces the nitrogen levels by offsetting it with helium, nitrogen being your limiting factor in diving, immediately your first limiting factor in diving. So you can reduce the amount of nitrogen in a mix by adding helium in, which really does nothing or even less than nitrogen. So you less narcosis and all that. Good example of that is back when they were trying to figure out what the U-boat off of New Jersey was, the U-869, before they knew what that was. They were diving this wreck 240 feet underwater on air. And this they switched over to Trimix, this new crazy thing called Trimix, and all of a sudden they could find the exit of the U-boat. All of a sudden they could map things and remember things. People died on this wreck diving it, trying to figure out what it was. Pretty brutal stories out there. You can look at The Last Dive for that. It's a really good book, and there's a bunch of different books on that. But Trimix was just a game-changing gas blend in deep diving.
It's also nice not to be narked when you're trying to work at tables in the water.
Yeah, I can't, I know people diving at, 140, 150 feet totally can't keep it together. They go on Trimix and they're clear as, everything's clear as a bell, in those cases, that U-boat, 100 feet deeper than that, totally crazy. You don't have a book recommendation for U-boat diving this week, do you, Nick?
Unfortunately not. I'm switching back to the freediving theme. So today's book is called One Breath, Freediving, Death, and the Quest to Shatter Human Limits by Adam Skolnick. One Breath is about competitive freediving told through the story of Nicolas Malvolio. He was an American freediver who had set out to shatter some freediving records, specifically U.S. records. And he was kind of, people had anticipated he would go far. Unfortunately, he died in 2013 during a competitive event trying to set some records. And he remains the only fatality in the history of the sport to that point and to today. But what the book does, it weaves a really fascinating account about his personality, his personal story from childhood to dreams to ambitions to become an elite freediver. And it weaves that in with kind of backgrounds, context as what competitive freediving is like. It also looks a bit about, postmortem, what happened and what caused his death and how that might have influenced competitive freediving, which remains a sport with an excellent safety record despite this tragedy. So if anybody's a freediver interested in freediving, or specifically interested in the competitive scene and kind of what it looks like, and maybe some of the risks associated with overtraining or that sort of thing, that's definitely a book somebody can read. Freediving is also a sport, that at some point, just like scuba did, evolved, and people are learning and trying new things. And really, I think some of the things that happened to Nick during his training are things that people have learned from or are still learning from in freediving.
Yeah, it's a really good book. I've actually read this one, so I'm one up on this challenge. But gives you some great lessons. Teaches you definitely some critical looks at what safeties can be done and not what you should be done. That leads me, speaking of things that you shouldn't do while freediving, freediving alone. Nick, I hear you can tell us something about freediving alone.
So tell us why we should not freedive alone.
Don't freedive alone. It's the same thing. If you're a scuba diver, freediver, just don't do it alone. It's always better when you do it with someone else. So yeah, always make sure that you dive with a buddy, whether it's scuba diving or freediving. It's more fun, and no matter how many times you've gone diving, there's always that worst case scenario. There's always a chance something could go wrong, especially if you're free diving. I've never dove alone. I've never had a shallow water blackout, but I've talked to someone who has, and it sounds really scary, and it could kill you. So I definitely don't recommend it.
Yeah, so safety tip of the week: never freedive alone. And if you are going to get into freediving, take a course, get certified. YouTube and the internet is not the place to learn freediving.
Yeah, that's another thing. Going on, forums and Reddit and all those sites. Just because someone sounds like they know what they're talking about doesn't mean that they do. You know, even though they say everything you read on the internet is true. I read that on the internet.
Nick Fisher, standing in for April's normal social media follow segment here. Who should we follow this week on social media?
This week, we should all be following Alex St. Jean. Alex is an underwater photographer, born and raised in Montreal, but is currently based in Mexico. His photography interests are in marine wildlife, freediving, and ocean culture. He has traveled and explored the oceans through photography and passion for what the ocean has to offer. His photographs are as diverse as they are beautiful. You can explore his use of light underwater to create amazing artistic photos on Instagram at Alex St. Jean Photo.
We'll have a link to that down in the show notes. Thanks for taking that up, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Anytime.
April does a challenging job there, so
I do not envy her position. I can't wait for her to be back next week.
Sorry, Will.
No offense, Will.
Hey, it's all right.
You might be taking my job. Who knows?
Wait, you guys get paid for this?
Yeah.
You didn't know there was money in scuba diving?
We get paid in Torpedo Rays scuba bucks.
Wait, we get Torpedo Rays scuba bucks? I didn't know.
No, I
You guys
wish.
are getting paid? It's like that meme format.
I'm losing money on this.
From We're the Millers. Have you seen that one?
No.
Hey, Nick Fisher, I think we need to start a union. He's getting paid. We're not.
I'm not getting paid.
I want my
losing
Torpedo
money.
Rays bucks.
I'm paying Adobe more than I make on this show.
So if you want to follow us on Patreon, which we don't have, so I won't say
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
If you want some of our free Torpedo Rays bucks, smash that like and subscribe button.
That does it for today's episode. I'd like to thank our special guest, Will Ristine. Thanks for being here, Will.
Thank you guys for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure. You had lots of great and interesting points, and really appreciate you spending some time with us, and hope you can do that again. Is there anywhere, do you have any, Instagram, Twitters, anything like that you want to share?
No.
No? Okay. Don't follow Will anywhere. Just come track him down.
Not really a social media
I'm
guy.
so glad he wasn't the social
sorry.
media follow for this week.
That's good.
That would have been fun.
Just come to Grenada. What's the awesome dive shop there in Grenada?
Aquanauts Grenada. Make sure you guys check them out. They do have an Instagram and a Facebook page. So sure.
We'll make sure to share those in the show notes.
Right.
And of course, it wouldn't be a show without Nick Fisher.
Thanks for having me on again, Justin. Looking forward to next week.
And me too. Mr. Winkler, thanks for putting this all together.
And it was fun to have Will on here and catch up with him and have him on the show. Thanks for coming, Will.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, you can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook with @divein.thepodcast. You can email us at divein.thepodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our new website at diveinthepodcast.com. You can find me at iDiveOK. Nick Winkler is at Nicholas Winkler Photography. Nick Fisher is at scuba_406. You can find links for everything we mentioned today, and the show notes are on our website. We'll see you next Monday when we chat with PADI instructor, side mount diver, and future cave pro Amit Parasom. This episode of Dive in the Podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Torpedo Rays Scuba. Head over to your favorite podcast app, subscribe, rate, leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for listening.
Smash that like and subscribe button. See you next week.